أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم تبارك الذي بيده الملك وهو على كل شيء قدير الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا وهو العزيز الغفور الذي خلق 7 سماوات طباقا ما ترى في خلق الرحمن من تفاوت فارجع البصر هل ترى من فطور ثم ارجع البصر كرتين ينقلب إليك البصر خاسئا وهو حسير ولقد زينا السماء الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قال جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو اجهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاسدا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم من أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى عمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشأكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي زرعكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يخيل الكافرين من عذاب عليم قل هو الرحمن أم آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
محمد وعلى محمد صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم. دی تھی اماں نے جو پوشاک وہ لا دو زینب، دی تھی اماں نے جو پوشاک وہ لا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. آج مقتل میں فقط بات تمہاری ہوگی، ابھی اماں سے ملاقات ہماری ہوگی، ابھی اماں سے ملاقات ہماری ہوگی. کوئی پیغام اگر ہے تو سنا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. ہاتھ پابند رسن پہنا تمہارے ہوں گے، مجھ کو رہ رہ کے خیال آتا ہے لاشے سے میرے، مجھ کو رہ رہ کے خیال آتا ہے لاشے سے میرے. تیر کس طرح نکالو گی بتا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. میرے لاشے کی رہے گی تمہیں پہچان بہن، چاک کر دو میرے کرتے کا گریبان بہن، چاک کر دو میرے کرتے کا گریبان بہن. کوئی لوٹے نہ اسے ایسا بنا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں پہنا دو زینب. باہر آنے کو نہ خیمے سے میں کہتا تم کو، ہوتے عباس تو تکلیف نہ دیتا تم کو، ہوتے عباس تو تکلیف نہ دیتا تم کو. بن کے عباس مجھے زی پہ بٹھا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. قید خانے کی سنبھالو یہ امانت بی بی، گود میں لو اسے مظلوم ہو رخصت بی بی، گود میں لو اسے مظلوم ہو رخصت بی بی. میرا دامن میری بچی سے چھڑا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. جب سے اکبر گئے بینائی بھی آنکھوں کی گئی، لا کے دے دو علی اصغر کی نشانی کوئی، لا کے دے دو علی اصغر کی نشانی کوئی. کرتا بے شیر کا آنکھوں سے لگا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. گھر سے شبیر جنازے کی طرح سے نکلے، سبھی روتے تھے تکلم در خیمے پہ کھڑے، سبھی روتے تھے تکلم در خیمے پہ کھڑے. شہ نے جس دم کہا مرنے کی رضا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. دی تھی اماں نے جو پوشاک وہ لا دو زینب، اپنے ہاتھوں سے کفن مجھ کو پہنا دو زینب. پر محمد و محمد صلی اللہ
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. It is with great sadness that we received the news of the passing of the great scholar Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh Amuli, who passed away in Iran yesterday. Can I please request for him and for all marhumin the recitation of Surah Al-Fatiha? Women, during the 10 days of Ashra-e Muharram, the children of Wessex Jamaat were encouraged to prepare and submit their various creative works on the topic, We love Hasnain alayhi salam. Alhamdulillah, we have received some fantastic entries which have been assembled into a video compilation. It gives me great honor to present this compilation to you this evening. Can I please request that we begin with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly. Forever. We will never let it fall. When we see it, we stand tall. Salute it and we then call to you, Hussein, help us all. We will never let it. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. We will never let it fall. When we see it, we stand tall. Salute it and we then call to you, Hussein, help us all. We will never let it fall. When we see it, we stand tall. Salute it and we then call to you, Hussein, help us all. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. In Muharram, every hall has this flag hung on the walls. We saw it when we were small. We cried Hussein when we crawled. In Muharram, every hall has this flag hung on the walls. We saw it when we were small. We cried Hussein when we crawled. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. We will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure. we will fly it forever. Oh Hussein, just like Abbas, we'll plant the flag with our hands, one for every grain of sand, throughout each and every land. Oh Hussein, just like Abbas, we'll plant the flag with our hands, one for every grain of sand, throughout each and every land. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure, we will fly it forever. Our home is Karbala, where the youth of the Shia, Hussein's flag is our treasure, we will fly it forever. We know.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين خالق السماوات والأرضين. الحمد لله الذي بعث أنبياءه بالحق والهدى ثم ختمهم بحبيبه المصطفى. الحمد لله الذي جعل إكمال ديننا وإتمام نعمته بولاية المرتضى. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المذمومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله في كتابه وقوله بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما عاهدوا الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نهبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلى على محمد وآل محمد. Sheikh said, my elders, brothers and sisters in Iman and Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we continue on the topic that we have started, which is obstacles to integrity. And we have said so far that we want to look at those issues that we face in our day-to-day life, those obstacles that we meet in our day-to-day life that makes us go against those values that we know that we should have, those values that we profess to have, and those values that are a part of the teaching of this religion. But sometimes things happen in life that makes us break or go against those values. Now, yesterday we spoke about peer pressure, we spoke about conformity, that sometimes when people in our surrounding, everyone is swimming, so to say, in one direction, we will then also turn in the very same direction. We will go towards the very same route without thinking, or even if we think, even if we feel that this is wrong, but because everyone else is doing it, we will also do it. And this is what we said, this is one of the things that is wrong. If you ask anyone, it doesn't have to be a Muslim you ask anyone, that is it good to conform to the ideas of society, whatever those ideas might be, and the instinct for everyone is to say no. You have to think about what is being presented to you. One hadith, before we go into the topic of today, one hadith that in a very beautiful way describes the concept that we could call integrity is from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, where it is reported that he has said, تَقْبَلُ لِي سِتَّةً, he says, except, or تَقَبَّلُ لِي سِتَّةً, he says, except from me 6 traits. Except 6 things, 6 traits. If you do that, I will accept, meaning I will guarantee paradise for you. So 6 traits, the Prophet says, if you have these 6 traits, if you make sure that they are within you, you have been guaranteed paradise according to this riwayah. The first one, he says, إِذَا حَدَثْتُمْ فَلَا تُكَذِّبُوا or فَلَا تَكْذِبُوا. He says, when you speak, don't lie. The first condition, that the thing that the Prophet says, when you speak, do not lie. Now, this is something that we talk about easily, but it is very difficult to live up to. It is a value that we find is very difficult to live up to never tell a lie, never say things which are untrue. But when we look at the essence of this teaching, it is to be truthful. It is to keep your promises. It is when you've said that you will do something, you do something. I was talking to some of the brothers yesterday. Sometimes when we want to play with a child, maybe the child is sitting in the center and the child is very cute, and you want to attract the attention of the child, you will tell the child, you make some kind of noise that, look, I have chocolate, I'll give you some chocolate if you come to me. Well, you don't have that chocolate, but you'll or candy or whatever it might be. Then the child will come to you, and when the child comes to you, there's no chocolate, but you got your pinching of the child. You got to pinch the child. Now, you shouldn't pinch the child. Yeah, please try to understand that. What happened here? You actually told a lie to the child. You told the child that you will give the child chocolate, and what you are doing is you're telling the child that adults cannot be trusted. That you come to the mosque, whatever it might be, but especially when it's at the center at the mosque, and you actually told the child that if you come to me, I'll give you candy. You don't give them candy. You are lied to the child. You've taught the child that you cannot trust what's happening here. What is being told to you at the center, you cannot trust that as being trustworthy, as being true. You should expect lies from this place. So we need to be careful how, even at the level of a child, how our words can affect their mentality and the way they perceive the world. And this is just a simple example. Even at home, if you make a promise to a child that you'll give them something, give them that. If you make a promise to a child that you're going to take them somewhere, then fulfill that promise. Make sure that your children can actually trust you. But this goes beyond that. Not only with your children, even the Prophet is called, before he becomes a prophet, the Quraysh know him as what? As-Sadiq and Al-Amin, the truthful and the trustworthy. And this is the second thing that the Prophet says. وَإِذَا وَعَدْتُمْ, when you make a promise, فَلَا تَخْلِفُوا, when you make a promise, don't break that promise. وَإِذَا اِعْتَمَنْتُمْ فَلَا تَخُونُوا, when you are given a trust, don't break that trust. Now, I'm not sure if we completely understand this concept today when we say that the Prophet was trustworthy. Just to give you a very simple example, if you have valuables today and you want to, I'm not talking about money, money is in your bank account, but for example, you have gold, silver, you have jewelry, things of that sort, and you are going to on a long journey. Now, either you will keep them at home, and the home you might have a safe, and you might have an alarm system at home, or you might not feel safe keeping it at home, so you will keep them in a bank safe. You might go to the bank and keep them in a safe there, or you might go and give them in old days, in the days before banks, what they would do, in the days before electronics, before safes, before all these things. If you're going on a long journey, what do? You have gold, because then money is gold and silver. Or you might have jewelry. What do? You go to someone that you feel that you can trust, and you hand it to them, that I'm going on a journey, I will be back in maybe a month or 2 months. When I come back, please hand this back to me. And you know, if you give it to someone that you can't trust, you gave them 100 dinar, you come back and he says, no, there was only 90 dinar. What 100 dinar? I don't remember any 100 dinar. This is what it means that the Prophet is trustworthy. Whatever people would give him, they knew that the Prophet would always return the exact same amount or the exact same things that they had given to him. The Prophet would not do what others do, to say that I have taken a commission for myself. These ahibba'i. Now, how does this play out in our life? For example, you work in an office space, and this is integrity, ahibba'i. This is integrity. You work in an office space, in a workplace, you have promised your employer that you are going to give them 8 hours a day. Or it might be any type of job, but let's go with an office. You promise your employer what? That you're going to give them how much time? You're getting a wage, right? You're getting a pay. You're being paid for your time. How many hours did you promise? 8 hours a day. Is the 8 hours a day what you work in UK? It's 8 hours, right? It's not like the Americas, or the States where God knows how many hours they're working. I'm presuming it's 8 hours. You promised 8 hours a day. 1 hour of that you spend on YouTube. 1 hour of that you spend on Facebook. 1 hour of that you spend speaking with your friends. How much time did you actually spend working for your employer? If you made a promise to your employer, this is the trust between you and the employer. If you are not fulfilling your trust, you are not living up to the prophetic sunnah. This is also a way that we don't keep our promises. Or, the classical idea of stealing office supplies. I'm not sure if people do that in UK. This is a common problem, I know, at least in Sweden, that office supplies disappear, and then they start asking, where is all the office supply gone? And of course, you know the answer. People are taking every day something home, something is disappearing, and then they have to buy in new office supplies. Besides these are practical, everyday things that we need to think about, how we are keeping our integrity or we are not keeping our integrity. Then the Prophet says, so these are, don't lie, don't break your promise, don't break the trust. And then he says, وَغَضُّ أَبْصَارَكُمْ, lower your gaze. وَاحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَكُمْ, and protect your private parts. وَكَفُّوا أَيْدِيَكُمْ وَأَلْسِنَتَكُمْ, and hold back, control your hands and your tongues. So the first had to do on being reliable. The second part, the last part that we talked about, has to do with your actions. It has to do with your day-to-day interaction. It has to do what you do when you are in society. Can people, when you look, for example, when you go out, are you lowering your gaze from that which is haram? Are you controlling your desires? Are you protecting your private parts? Meaning, are you controlling yourself from going to places you should not go to, doing things you should not do, seeing things you should not see? And keep your hands and tongue under control, meaning do not harm others with your hands and your tongue. Now, I want to concentrate on the part where we discuss that are you keeping your desires under control? And desires are of different types. And we human beings, we have different types of desires. And desires are not necessarily something wrong, but it depends what we want to achieve with those desires. You see, there is a category mistake that we are told to do in the West. A category mistake. We want well-being, but we are sold pleasure. Okay, there's a huge difference between well-being and pleasure. And we're going to look at this for a short moment. I'm not saying pleasure is wrong. We have to keep that in mind as well. Pleasure is good, but what we want is well-being. When we attract too much pleasure, when we go towards too much pleasure, pleasure becomes the victor over us. And we're going to look at some hadith for that. But right now, I want to look at one statement of Imam Hussein, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. On the day of Ashura, when he is addressing the enemy army, in the morning before the battle, he gives two khutbahs. There are two actual sermons of Imam Hussein narrated, recorded in the books of history. In one of them, he says, why is it, وَيْلَكُمْ مَا عَلَيْكُمْ? What is the problem with you? Woe be to you. I keep on telling you who I am, what my purpose is. You called me. All these things that I tell you, who my father is, who my grandfather is, who my mother is, who my uncles are, I keep on telling you all these things, but you don't understand. It looks like you're not registering. Nothing is happening up here. Why? What's the problem? Then he says, I know why you're not listening. He says, وَكُلُّكُمْ عَاسٍ لِأَمْرِ. All of you are transgressing my command. غَيْرَ مُسْتَمِعِ قَوْلِي. You are not listening, you're not paying attention. Why? فَقَدْ مُلِئَتْ بُطُونُكُمْ مِنَ الْحَرَامِ وَطُبِعَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُم. He says, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you what the problem is. He says the problem, so when you go to a doctor, the doctor will tell you, when you describe the symptoms to a doctor, they will tell you that, okay, the symptoms, because you have this symptom, the problem seems to be this. This is your diagnosis, this is your disease. Imam Hussein himself is listing the symptoms of the enemy army. The Hakim of the Ummah is listing the symptoms of the enemy army, and then he says, now I'll tell you what the problem is. I'll tell you what the diagnosis is. I'll tell you what your sickness is. Your sickness is that you have filled your stomachs with haram. What haram? What? Did they eat swine? Were they not Muslims? Did they used to eat the pig? Did they go to the Christian neighbors and eat their pig? Did they drink alcohol? Amongst them were people who used to pray Salatul Layl. What do you mean eat pig? Huh? What do you mean drink alcohol? So what is Imam Hussein talking about? Imam Hussein is talking about the fact that they have become so accustomed to the pleasures of dunya that come what may, they will fill their stomachs with the pleasures of dunya. Now that, meaning they will keep on consuming the pleasures of dunya, whether they be halal or haram, whether they be in moderation or out of moderation. They will keep on consuming the pleasures of dunya to the point, وَطُبِعَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ, to the point that there's a seal set on their hearts. Now, Ahibba'i, we want to make sure that we are not amongst those people who fall prey for the pleasures of dunya. Again, I'm not saying that we should not enjoy dunya. This is very important. Please do not leave this majlis today saying that, Hasnain has said that we don't want to enjoy dunya, we just want to become hermits living somewhere in the mountain. And no, this is not what we are trying to say. Please be very careful. In Surah Al-A'raf, verse number 31, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya bani Adam, O children of Adam, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ masjid. At every point of prayer, masjid can mean place of prayer, but also time of prayer. At every point of prayer, take up your zina. Zina means your ornament, your beautification. So Allah is telling you to have beautification. Did Allah say don't have beautification? Don't have nice clothes, don't wear nice suits. Allah said, have it, it's for you. But when it's time for prayers, when we wake up early in the morning, it's time for Fajr prayers, we're standing there in our pajamas, the least we could do is to add maybe just a shalwar kameez or add a kanzu or something to make us more presentable. The way that you would make yourself presentable if you were standing in front of your boss, for example, you wouldn't stand in any way. Allah says, خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ masjid. Every point of prayer, wear your ornaments, beautify yourself. God, one of the Imams say that إِنَّ اللَّهُ الْجَمِيلُ يُحِبُّ الْجَمَالِ. God is beautiful and He loves beauty. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ masjid وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا وَلَا تُسْرِفُوا. Eat and drink and don't be immoderate. So God says, eat, drink, that's fine, but don't be immoderate. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُسْرِفِينَ. God does not love the immoderate. This word musrif and israf, at least in the Khoja community and the Pakistani community as well, I think, we talk about Ishraf. That when we're eating food, we're told not to throw away food. Why? Ashraf tase. So tase? Ashraf tase. Ashraf na karwana. Now, what does that mean? Don't make ashraf. We understand ashraf to mean don't waste. Don't waste. Ashraf is not waste. It's not ashraf, it's israf. But in our lingo, it becomes ashraf. Israf is not waste. There's actually another verse in the Quran for waste. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Bani Israel, وَآتِ ذِي الْقُرْبَ حَقَّهُ وَالْمِسْكِينَ وَابْنَ السَّبِيلِ وَلَا تُبَذِّرْ تَبْذِيرًا. Give the relatives their right and the poor and the traveler, but do not be wasteful. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. That the wasteful are the brothers of whom? Of the shayateen. So don't be wasteful. Don't throw away food. Don't be wasteful. But that's tabdhir. Israf does not mean wasteful. Israf means moderation, or rather immoderate. To be immoderate is israf. There's a narration. The problem is we don't study the Quran. We don't learn from the teachings of the Quran. We take the Quran as something to be recited during the nights of Ramadan, or when someone has passed away, we recite the Quran, but we don't really study the teachings of the Quran. And I blame myself first and foremost. There's a narration about how a Christian doctor addresses a Muslim doctor in the court of Harun al-Abbasi, known as Harun al-Rashid. He was not Rashid, we call him Abbasi. In the court of Harun al-Abbasi, a Christian doctor addresses, or in the time of the Harun al-Abbasi, a Christian doctor addresses a Muslim doctor. He says, you claim that your Quran has all types of knowledge. It covers everything. He says, where does the Quran teach you about medicine? Where does the Quran teach you about medicine? So the Muslim doctor recites this verse. Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat, drink, but don't be immoderate. That Christian doctor, he looks at him and he says, you know what? Your Quran left nothing for Galen. If those who have studied medical history will know who Galen is. Galen was a Greek doctor who was very influential during the times, or during before the time of Ibn Sina, basically. So he says, your book has left nothing for Galen. Why? Because as long as you keep moderate in eating and drinking, you will be safe. Imam Ali says that one of the ways to avoid visiting a doctor is to make sure that you eat moderately. Don't eat when you're not hungry, and when you eat, stop eating before you feel filled up, and chew your food properly. So you follow this simple advice and you'll be okay. So any doctor, anyone who studied how the body works will tell you that these are basics of medicine, inshallah. I'm not sure if they still teach you that, but traditionally they used to teach you that. Besides, now the question is, what do we mean by moderation? Follow along with me in a thought experiment. Let's say you want to make a cake. In Sweden we have pancakes. You know pancakes, right? You have pancakes in UK? You eat pancakes? You should come to Sweden and eat Swedish pancakes, inshallah. You're all welcome, inshallah, to come to Sweden. Now let's say we want to make a pancake. We want to make Swedish pancakes. So I give you the recipe. I say you start with taking 2 deciliters of flour, of wheat flour. So you take that, you put that. That sounds reasonable, right? 2 deciliters. Then I say you add 2 eggs. Sounds reasonable? Sounds reasonable. Then I say you add 2 deciliters of milk. Sounds reasonable? Please tell me if it doesn't sound reasonable. Then I say you add 2 deciliters of sugar. Reasonable? No? Okay, well, not for the diabetic. Otherwise, sounds reasonable in a cake, 2 deciliters of sugar. Now I say add 2 deciliters of salt. Sound reasonable? But Baba, 2 deciliters of milk, you didn't complain. 2 deciliters of flour, you didn't complain. 2 deciliters of sugar, you didn't complain. 2 deciliters of salt, you're complaining. Why? Don't we say everything in moderation? Yes, everything in moderation doesn't mean everything is equal. Moderation means that you have to look at the thing that you have in front of yourself. Some things in moderation, you need to keep it less. Other things in moderation, you can have more of. This is the cognitive dissociation that we have, that when we say everything in moderation, we start allowing everything starts becoming halal, because we have this saying, everything in moderation. So this is something that we need to think about. But then God continues to say in Surah Al-A'raf, verse 32, قُلْ مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي أَخْرَجَ لِعِبَادِهِ وَالطَّيِّبَاتِ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ. Say, who has forbidden the good things that God has brought out for His servants? God did not forbid the good things of this dunya for you. مَنْ حَرَّمَ زِينَةَ اللَّهِ. Who has forbidden these good things? قُلْ هِيَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيا. The good things that God has brought out, it is for the believers in this dunya. And خَالِصَةً يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. For on the day of Qiyamah, it is khalisatan for the mu'mineen. It is khalisatan for those who believe. In this dunya, everyone has a share of it, but on the day of judgment, it is khalisatan for you. So the point here is what? That we are to enjoy the good things in dunya, but in moderation. You see, we find many hadith where we are told to respect the poor, to have to take care of the poor, and hadith which says that if you want to find the vicinity, the closeness of God, you should have that amongst the poor. You should sit amongst the poor. You should the poor people are very close to God and so forth. But there are also hadith that warns us from being poor. We have several hadith that warns us from being poor. So, for example, in one riwayah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, كَادَ الْفَقْرُ أَنْ يَكُونَ كُفْرًا. He says that it is almost as if poverty is kufr. Now, kufr doesn't mean disbelief. We normally translate it as disbelief, but it is much, much wider than that. I don't have time to go through that right now, but there's much more meaning. Disbelief is one of the meanings, but the meaning of kufr is much deeper than that. But the Prophet is warning us, and he says, الْفَقْرُ أَشَدُّ مِنَ الْقَتْلِ. He says the poverty is worse than killing someone. So what does this mean? Where does this leave us? If we are to enjoy this dunya in moderation, what is it that we want to achieve from this dunya? One thing that we are to achieve from this dunya, which we pray for, remember we pray for this in the dua of sajda. One of the du'as that we normally recite is Allahumma inni as'aluka al-afiyah. Oh Lord, I am asking you for afiyah. I'm asking you for well-being. This afiyah is something that we should strive for. Afiyat ad-din wa dunya. Did not the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, in a very famous hadith, say to Abu Dharr al-Ghifari that make use of 5 before 5. Make use of 5 before 5. And he says amongst them, for example, he says make use of your youth before your old age. Make use of your health before your sickness. Make use of your youthness before old age, and your richness before you get poor. All these things tells us what? That Islam encourages us to make use of afiyah. All these things that he's mentioning is what? Is afiyah, is well-being. Islam wants us to use our well-being. Islam wants us to be well off. Islam is not telling us that the Quran, teachings of the Quran is not that we should shun the dunya. Please remember, this is very important. So here we have to ask ourselves, why? What is the purpose when Islam says don't be poor? Try to avoid poverty if you can. Of course, if you're poor and you're not able to get out of the situation, it is not a sin. But when Islam says try to avoid being poor, when Islam says you should strive for afiyah, you should strive for well-being, what is the purpose of these things? One of the purposes is that it strengthens our integrity. Because when we are poor, it is easier for us to become victims of hunger, for example. It is easier for us to become victims of fear. It is easier for us to become victims of danger. It is easier for us to become the victims of sickness. And when all these things happen, our integrity is easily broken. It is easily torn down. You see, let's make a thought experiment here with me. Would you say that £50,000 a year is a good income? Would you say that's? I mean, I know you won't become Jeff Bezos, but would you be able to survive on £50,000 a year? Would that be okay? So in your mind, now think about what you could buy, what kind of life you would have if your income, yearly income, and you didn't have any other capital. Your yearly income is £50,000. Okay? What kind of car you would have, what kind of house you would have, and so forth. Now imagine someone comes and tells you that I think you're a very good worker. I'm going to hire you and I'm going to double your salary overnight. Okay, so from £50,000 a year, you go to £100,000 a year. Will that 100,000, those extra 50, will they make a difference to your life? Be honest, will they make a difference to your life? Will you be able to get a better car? Will you be able to get a better house? Will you be able to buy more things for your children? £50,000 will make a huge difference. Now imagine the situation is different, that your yearly income is £500,000. So you have a very good job. From those £500,000, or sorry, rather 50,000, £500,000, someone comes and says, I will double your wage and you will get £1 million pounds a year. Will that make those 1 million, will that make those extra £500,000, will those make as much a difference in your life as those 50,000 would? The difference between 50 to 100,000 is huge. The difference between 500,000 to 1 million is not as great. You can make some improvements in your life. If your income, yearly income is £5 million and someone turns it to 10 million, will it add any value to your life now? Anything more than that you will actually be able to give more money in charity, will that add anything more in your life? So what this experiment shows us is that there are certain things that money can buy, certain well-being that money can buy, but at certain point there's an end. Money can only buy so much. Money can only give you so much. So after that level, they call it, this is called diminishing rate of return. Those of you who have studied economics, you'll understand this concept, but this is also used in psychology, diminishing rate of return. The joy, the pleasure, the well-being you give, you might have more pleasure in life, but you're not necessarily having more well-being in life. And there's a difference between pleasure and well-being. And this is what we want to look at carefully now. Let's say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Time is running away. This concept is called hedonic adaptation. Amongst the psychologists, they tell us that we human beings, we adopt to pleasures and to griefs. So for example, you take people who have been in war, people who have, for example, in Syria or Yemen, and you ask them, people who were very well off before the war, they are now living in terrible circumstances. After a while, they adopt to the new situation, so their happiness has not decreased. Your happiness, your well-being after a certain level of income will not increase, and at a certain loss will not decrease. This is very important to remember. So therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He describes in the Quran, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ, that this insan, he is kanud, he is very ungrateful towards his Lord, this man. وَإِنَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ لَشَهِيدٌ, he himself is a witness to that. وَإِنَّهُ لَحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ, he's very intense in his love of wealth. We believe, we have this idea that it is having more in life that will make us happier. I hope I'm not boring you with all these psychological terms, but I want you to understand what I'm trying to get at, how this, the looking for pleasure becomes a obstacle to integrity. Within psychology, they say that human beings are controlled by three different motivations. All animals are controlled by three different motivations. The first motivation is the motivation to avoid pain. Think about this. What will we not do in our lives to avoid pain? Anything that can help us have less pain in our life, we are ready to take that. I'm talking about the tabi'ah, because I want to contrast tabi'ah to fitrah. I'm not talking about your fitrah, I'm talking about tabi'ah. In tabi'ah, meaning your nature, we want to avoid pain. We want to do things as much as we can to avoid pain. we want to do things as much as we can to seek pleasure. When we eat food, for example, we're seeking pleasure. When we play football, we're seeking pleasure. When we watch football, we're seeking pleasure. Everyone might have different types of pleasure, but that is pleasure. The third thing that we do is for the sake of conserving energy. We don't want to waste more energy than is necessary. These are the three things that motivates our behavior. Now, when these three things are in play, when we see that we have values that are on a certain level, but these three things come in the way, we might opt for more pleasures rather than following our integrity. We might opt for avoiding pain, although we know that the pain is in line with our integrity. We might opt for conserving energy, although we might know that our integrity demands that we do something else. For example, easy example. You come home from work and you had a long day. It's your turn to do the dishes. We live in an egalitarian society. You divided between you and your spouse who is supposed to do the dishes. But you know that your wife, she's very kind. So if she sees that you haven't done the dishes, she'll do it anyway. Right? Inshallah, you all have kind wives like that. So you know that if you haven't done the dishes, she'll do it. So you have nothing to worry about. You had a long day, she's had a long day. You look at the dishes, Jo aijase. You go to bed. Now, what did you do there? Your integrity says what? It is your turn to do the dishes. You should take the responsibility to take care of the dishes. But you are conserving energy. You are avoiding pain. You're putting the responsibility on someone else. This is a very easy way for us to understand how we go against our integrity, although we know what we should be doing. In the society that we live in today, we are told that we should allow ourselves to see what gives us pleasure and accept that, and we should accept and we should make it a part of our life. So for example, I'm sure you heard the terminology, it's natural. It's natural. Don't stop us from doing things which are natural. It's common. Everyone is doing it. Why? It's pleasurable. You should not stop yourself from having pleasure. You know, when you hear things like this, and this is where I tell you that we need to make a difference between well-being, which is in line with the fitrah, and pleasure, which is not necessarily in line with the fitrah, but definitely in line with tabi'ah. You know, in nature, because sometimes as I said, we hear this argument that it's only natural, that we should do things which are natural, that animals do this. You know, in nature, you've seen lions, right? The way lions live together is called a pride. That the lions, when they live together, the head of that pride, or the group of lions, the qabila of the lions, so to say, is always a male. It's always a male who is the head of the tribe, although the male is not necessarily the one who is doing all the work. But the male is the head of the tribe. But the male is always very careful, because there will come a time when a younger male will try to take the position of the male leader, of the tribe leader. So that male is always very careful. When the male lion leader is defeated, and another lion now comes and becomes the head of the tribe, he will kill off the offspring, the young children of that previous male. He will kill them off. Why? Because he wants to have his own offspring, and he wants to make sure that his offspring has a higher possibility of surviving. If the pride is taking care of the previous children and his own children, then the chances are less for them to survive. What am I trying to say? In nature, it is natural to kill the children of your competition. Can you see that? Even if it's your own species, in nature, it's natural among some animals to kill the offspring of your competition. No. Sometimes in nature, you will find that parents will kill their own children. When, for example, a child is born with certain disabilities, to the point that child is a liability for the parents or for the group, then they will kill that offspring because they want to make sure that they conserve energy and that they make sure that they use whatever food that they are getting to make sure that the strongest will survive. In nature, this is very common. Now I ask you, amongst human beings, if we were to adopt these values, that you kill the children of your opposition, or you kill the children of your competitor, would that fly? Would that be okay? Would anyone say that this is okay to do? Most people, human beings, say this is not okay. Or to kill your own children even though they're born with disabilities, our sense of human dignity says this is not okay to do. Which means what? Which means that when we talk about pleasures and when we talk about joy and these things, we need to be very, and that we should embrace our pleasures. We should embrace our animal side. We don't mean that. These are just empty words that people use, but they don't really mean that. Pleasure has become a god in today's day and age. I'll continue on this theme tomorrow because time is running away. But pleasure has become a god in this day and age. It is your pleasure that is the most important part. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He talks about this in the Quran. He says, Salawat Muhammad. He says, Surah Furqan, أَرَأَيْتَ مَنِ اتَّخَذَ إِلَهَهُ هَوَاهُ أَفَأَنْتَ تَكُونُ عَلَيْهِ وَكِيلًا. Have you seen the one who takes his desires as his God? You see, when we make desires our main goal in life, then they become our God. When we make our low desires the thing that we live for, so the balance that we need to strike, when we talk about obstacles to integrity, the balance that we need to strike is that we should enjoy this dunya, we should have good things of this dunya in moderation, but our lives should be for higher values. And when the higher values and the pleasures of this dunya are colliding, we need to stay strong with our values. This is, of course, when we look at the events of Karbala, we find that amongst the people who were fighting Imam Hussein, there were people who were fighting for the pleasures of dunya. Some of them were afraid. They wanted to avoid pain. Some of them were afraid that if we don't go out and fight Imam Hussein, then Ibn Ziyad will punish us. So they went out to fight Imam Hussein. Some of them was looking for the pleasures of dunya. We mentioned a couple of nights ago, Umar ibn Sa'ad, who had been promised the governorship of what is today Iran. And then when Imam Hussein is telling him that I will give you other things instead of the governorship of Iran, or Ray, he refused. He said, no, this is the apple of my eye. This is what I want. This is my desire. So we need to look at these events that transpired. No, to the point that one of the soldiers on the night of Sham Ghariba, or at the point of Asr of Ashur, when the tents are burning, the ladies are running out from the tent. And when they're running out from the tents, the enemy army approaches and they start looting them. They start removing what they have on their heads and the earrings and the jewelry. And one of the daughters of Imam Hussein, she reports, she says that a man came and he snatched away my earrings. But at the same time as he did that, he was crying. So I asked him, why are you crying? He said that I have never seen any people being as oppressed as you are. So she says, then why are you snatching away my earrings? Why don't you stop? He says, if I don't do it, someone else will do it. This is the way that they are seduced by this dunya. That just to get their hands on a couple of earrings, they are ready to violate the hurma of the household of Rasulullah. Amongst those women who stood tall despite what happened is Sayyidah Zainab. And we want to spend time today remembering this grand lady. I said yesterday that Sayyidah Zainab, after the death of Imam Hussein, she took upon herself to be Abbas. She took upon herself to be Ali al-Akbar. She took upon herself to be Imam Hussein. When the children were crying, she was there to comfort them. When the children were crying, she was there to make sure to give them that protection they needed. We are told that in the prison of Sham, when One day Imam Sajjad finds that his aunt is saying her prayers, her tahajjud prayers, sitting down. He turns to his aunt and he says, "Oh, my aunt, I have never seen you praying sitting down. Why is it that I see you sitting down in your prayers now?" She says, "Oh, my son Sajjad, the food that they give us in the prison, the amount is so small that it's not sufficient for the children. So I give my portion to the children as well. And therefore I have become so weak that I can no longer stand up." This is the same Zainab that stands when she stands in front of Ibn Ziyad, and when she stands in front of Yazid, she stands like she's the daughter of Ali. That people, when they hear her speak, they say, "What has happened? I hear someone speaking like I thought I would never hear them speak again, because it is as if I hear Ali speaking again." Lady Zainab has defeated Ibn Ziyad. Lady Zainab has defeated Yazid. To the point that Yazid says to Imam Sajjad, he calls Imam Sajjad and says that I have allowed you to leave. I have allowed you to go back to Medina, or you can stay here. You are no longer prisoners. When he says that, Imam Sajjad says that I will ask my auntie Zainab, I will ask her what we want to do. So he goes to Lady Zainab and comes back with a message of Lady Zainab. She says that, "Tell Yazid that we want three things. We want to get the heads of our shuhada back. We want a house where we can grieve for a few days before we move on. And we also want to our tabarruk return. Every property, anything that they took from us, everything that they snatched away from us, we want that back." When Yazid hears of this, he says that, "As for the house where you want to do your aza, I'll give that to you. As for the heads, I will return them to you. But the property that we took away, it has been divided, it has been distributed. I can no longer collect that. I will give you money instead of that." At that point, they say that, "What will we do with your money? What money can replace the worth of the chadar that Lady Zahra used to wear? Or the turban of Rasulullah? Or the clothes of Imam Hussein? How can you replace that?" Ahibbai, we hear from the Arbab of Minbar that the ladies then gathered in a house, and ladies from Damascus also came, and the heads were then presented in that majlis. And I ask myself, how when the heads are presented, how each and every lady is crying. You know, before the heads are presented, you and me, when we hear about the events of Karbala, we have to be told about the events. But these ladies, they had seen everything. So it is sufficient for them that someone says, "Wa Abbasa," and they start crying. It is sufficient that someone says, "Wa Aliya," and they cry. It is sufficient that once someone says, "Wa Husayna," and they cry. And then I imagine when the heads come in, how much they must have cried. This caravan then sets off towards Medina. But before the caravan is coming towards Medina, they come to a point where the routes differ. They can go one route towards Karbala, one route towards Medina. So they say, "Let's go towards Karbala." And when they go towards Karbala, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari has already arrived to do the ziyarat of Imam Hussein. You know, when Jabir arrives, he doesn't know where the grave of Imam Hussein is. Jabir, he cries as he's looking for the graves. He's crying and he says that, "Oh, my Hussein, respond to me. Where are you? I have come to visit you." Then he says, my Habib is not replying to my cries. My Habib is not responding to my cries." Then he said, "How can my Habib respond to my cries when his body is in Karbala, but his head has been taken away from this place?" Then Ahibba'i, Imam Zain al-Abidin, as he approaches, he finds Jabir there. Imagine the state of Imam Sajjad. For many, many weeks, months, he has not seen a friendly face. He has not seen a stranger who is a friendly face. He has not seen anyone from Medina to come to console him. Imagine the joy he must have felt when he says Jabir. Jabir is his uncle. But when he sees Jabir, he tells Jabir, "Remove yourself from here, because the daughters of Ali want to come to the grave of Hussein and cry." Ahibbai, I don't know how Lady Zainab, when she comes to the grave of Hussein, what she says to Hussein on the grave of Hussein. Does she say, "Oh my brother Hussein, I have carried out each and every commandment. I have gone to the cities of the streets of Kufa and Damascus. I have preached the message. I have told them that you are not a Khariji. I have told them that you died for the sake of Haqq. I have told them that you are the grandson of Rasulullah." But maybe then she says that, "Hussein, you had given me one more responsibility, but your daughter that you had handed to me, she is no longer with me. She is lying in the prison of Damascus. Ahibbai, just one more line that I want to leave you with, and then it is for you and your tears." One of the scholars, they say that, and this is lisan hal. This is not something that happened. This is based on something that happened, but this is lisan hal. One event that transpired in Karbala was that when Lady Zainab, when she sees Hussein, when she sees the body of Hussein filled with arrows and wounds, and there is no head, and when she sees that there is the clothes has been taken away, she looks at the body of Hussein and she says, "Anta akhi Hussein? Are you really my brother Hussein? Is it you that is my brother Hussein?" One of the scholars, they say in Lisan Hal that when Lady Zainab returns from the streets of Kufa and Damascus, from all the trials and tribulations, having become an old woman, at that point when she throws herself on the grave of Hussein, he says, "Do not be surprised if a voice would come from the grave of Hussein saying, 'Anti ukhti Zainab, are you really my sister Zainab? Are you that sister that came with me from Medina to Karbala? Why is it that your hair has turned white? Why is it that your back is broken? What transpired that I see the traces of ropes on your arms?'" وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. يا الله يا الله يا الله يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب، بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها وسر المستودع فيها. Allah, we ask you that you increase our tawfiqat. We ask you that you forgive us for our sins. We ask you that you hasten the repairs from our hujjah, and that you join us with His closest associates. Allah, wherever we see oppression around the world, Allah, remove that oppression. Allah, allow us to be amongst the people who remove oppression around the world, and allow us to stay strong with our integrity. Matam ya Hussein.
حسين كل الحياة، حسين بعد الممات، حسين شمس الأباد، حسين ثار الله. حسين كل الحياة، حسين بعد الممات، حسين شمس الأباد، Hussein, God of love. Without serving Hussein, my life is work of pain. Life is lifeless without Hussein, take to fire. May every word I speak be the name of Hussein. I give my life away to Father's name. When I enter my grave, surrounded by my fears, I know I will be saved by the rolling tears. In darkness, you're my light, illuminate my life, forever by your side. Hussein, God of Allah, Hussein, كل الحياة، حسين بعد الممات، حسين شمس العباد، حسين نار الله. حسين كل الحياة حسين بعد الممات حسين كنت العباد حسين شار الله بسر دشت بلا نشا تھا بکھرا تیرا صرف اس پر نہیں ہوتے ہیں اہل رضا صدمہ اکبر جوان کیسے نہ جانے سہا آیا نہیں تھا کوئی بات تب جو چلا پہلے زیارت میری دل کی ہے یہ دعا آئیں گے ہم سبھی پر دیتے ہمیں بھی صدا داماد تمہیں ہم پہ وہ اتنی عذاب ہو کلمہ تیرا حسین یار اللہ حسین کل الحیات حسین بعد الممات حسین رحمت العباد حسین یار اللہ حسین کل الحیات حسین بعد الممات حسین رحمت العباد حسین یار اللہ Your dome and my vision, your pleasure, my mission. Kerala, my goal, Hussein, you're in my soul. With every passing day, increasing is my pain. Oh Lord, from my Hussein, how can I be away? I will come to your door, calling upon your floor, for heaven calls my name. Say your heaven's door, turn me back by your side, my heart hear you reside, you make my blood to sigh. Hussein, Ya Allah, Hussein, kullul hayat, Hussein, ba'd al-mamat, Hussein, amdul abad, Hussein, Ya Allah, Hussein, kullul hayat, Hussein, ba'd al-mamat, Hussein, amdul abad, Hussein, Ya Allah, Hussein, Ya Allah, Hussein, Ya Allah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي المجتبى السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميع شهداء كربلاء ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام عليك يا تسعة المعصومين من ذريتك علي بن الحسين زين العابدين ومحمد بن علي الفاقر وجعفر بن محمد الصادق وموسى بن جعفر الكاظم
وعلي بن موسى الرضا ومحمد بن علي الجواد وعلي بن محمد الهادي والحسن بن علي العسكري والحجة بن الحسن القائم المهد المنتظر عجل الله فرجا وسهل الله مخرجا وظهور الآن ورحمة الله وبركاته.
اللهم كل وليك حجة الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه وزكاته وتمتعه فيها طويلا.